Hey everybody, welcome to the 5th episode of the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Today I'll be talking about the second episode of Season 2 of The Witcher, Kaer Morhen. So got a chance to just watch this episode a few minutes ago, just wrapped it up. Pretty good follow-up to the first episode. Here we got to see more callbacks from, at least for me, from the Witcher 3 video game. We got to see Geralt go back to his childhood home where he grew up. Once again, spoiler alert, I'm going to be discussing the episode in pretty heavy detail, so, if you haven't seen it yet and you want to go in blind, consider this your warning. So Geralt and Ciri go back to his home, his childhood home of Kaer Morhen, where he was trained he was trained most of his life. We get to see the return, or we get to see a character from the video game and from the books, Vesemir, Geralt's childhood mentor. It's either Vesemir or Yesemir. I think it's Vesemir. I'll double check on that later. So if I butchered that name, apologies on that. I remember his character from The Witcher 3, so he was really cool. It was cool to see him in there, as well as kind of getting to see more of Geralt's background, and kind of the other Witchers in the series as well. And also kind of got to see kind of more of a softer side of his character in this episode in terms of his being sort of a surrogate father to Ciri. We kind of see more of that in this. And we also get to see, Vesemir, who is kind of his father figure. As well as we get to see kind of more of Yennefer's story. I kind of predicted this last time that this would be, I guess I thought there'd be more of a focus on Yennefer's story in this episode. I was wrong. It looks like it's still kind of focused mainly on Geralt, which in a sense I think was kind of cool because I liked seeing the conflict in this episode, at least in Kaer Morhen. Plus I liked seeing more of his backstory anyway. Not to say that the stuff with Yennefer wasn't interesting, it definitely was. Her and I believe the character's name is Fringilla have been captured by a group of rogue elves that are holding them hostage. They're brought forth to their leader, and basically from there they go through a series of trials with with a witch, Illithlin, I believe is her name. I could be butchering that name tremendously. And through there we get to see a lot of dream sequences from Yennefer, kind of showing I guess glimpses of like what the future could hold for her character, as well as Fringilla's character as well. It kind of feels like it's setting up for a huge conflict coming later in the show, so it's definitely interesting to see where that goes for sure. And back in Kaer Morhen with Geralt and Ciri, we definitely get to see some of the other Witchers, including one in particular, Eskel, the character who comes into this episode, who from the very beginning kind of seems like a pretty shady character. Kind of seems like there's kind of something going on with him, which of course we find out later that there actually is. He's been infected by, I'm just going to call it Groot. It's basically some kind of Groot monster infects him, like a tree creature, basically. And throughout the episode, it's become clear that he's becoming more and more he's becoming more and more affected by the infection that he has. At one point, he invites a bunch of women into Kaer Morhen, and while he's with one of them, when she takes his shirt off, we actually get to see like the injury that he has, and we literally see like roots sprouting out of his shoulder blade. And then near the end of the episode, the big conflict, of course, is Eskel becomes kind of the monster of the week that Geralt has to fight, and basically he becomes a giant Groot creature, and Geralt and Vesemir have to work together to take him down, which was a really cool action sequence. And I don't know if this was just me, but when I saw Eskel in his full tree form, I kind of got sort of a From Beyond vibe, and I have no idea why. I don't know if anybody out there has seen From Beyond. It's a horror movie, like a body horror movie from like 1986, starring Jeffrey Combs, and it's like one of the grossest movies I've ever seen in my life. I can't watch it while I'm eating. Like I won't want to eat for days after I watch that movie. Like it's disgusting. But really good practical effects. But the creature in that movie, Dr. Pretorius, for some reason, Eskel's tree form in The Witcher kind of reminded me of him in some ways. Not necessarily in terms of like the color, but like his face, the way his face looked with all the tentacles and stuff not tentacles, the tree branches coming out of it, kind of got a From Beyond vibe. I don't know if that was just me. Could be. Maybe I'm just weird. But yeah. I liked the effects on him. It looked like it was kind of a mix of CGI and practical effects, at least from what I could tell. Like his face looked like it was like they put prosthetics and makeup on it, but then the rest of his body was covered in tree bark and branches, so that was obviously CGI. But I liked the effects of that. It was really cool, and the way he was using his different vines throughout the room to attack Geralt and Vesemir, that was a really cool effect. So yeah, that was really awesome. Yeah, like just this whole episode, I really liked the idea of being back in childhood or Geralt's home, kind of getting to see where he was raised, getting to see some of the other Witchers too, and then kind of getting Ciri introduced to this world that Geralt is from. Another thing I really liked about this episode is we kind of got to see more of the fatherly side of Geralt. Up until this point, he's been relatively cold towards Ciri. Not really, I mean, it's only been 2 episodes, but, there really wasn't a sense in episode 1 that there was much of a fatherly connection to her. But in this one, we definitely kind of see his obvious regard for her safety and her caring for him as well. We see that in the end of the episode when Geralt returns to her after the big fight. She seems genuinely relieved that he is safe. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see their relationship kind of growing a little bit. You can kind of see that they are starting to care more and more about each other. We're kind of seeing Geralt kind of soften up as a character a little bit more. He's kind of just a big softy at heart. So yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic too, because at this point Geralt doesn't know that Yennefer is still alive, and so really in a lot of ways, Ciri is kind of one of the last few people, at least as far as he's aware, that he has left in his life. So it's definitely it's interesting to see how this is impacting him. So I'm curious to see how this goes on throughout the rest of the season. As far as obviously I'm sure that they're going to reintroduce Yennefer to Geralt sometime later in the season. But I would imagine not for a while. But yeah, the dream sequence that Yennefer has, where she's with that elven witch, yeah, it was definitely a good, interesting moment, because it was like her and Fringilla and like the other elf leader. They're all kind of have this dream spell being cast on them at the same time, so they're all kind of in the same place, but they're having different visions. And so it's kind of cool to see like the different visions that they're all having within this sequence. So yeah, like that was definitely interesting, and definitely pretty brutal to watch too. We kind of see Yennefer for the first time in a while. It kind of seems like she's definitely out of her element. When the witch tries to get her to use a spell, it's like that first spell that she tries to use back in the beginning of the first season with like the rock and the flower, and Yennefer can't seem to do it, even though she's saying the spell correctly. It doesn't seem like it's working for her. And so seeing that was definitely, it was tough for her character, but it was an interesting moment. And it was a cool, really creepy, atmospheric scene. So I dug that part. I would say that the parts with Yennefer were, I guess they're trying to set up for future events that are coming, but they weren't quite as interesting as the parts with Geralt, in my opinion. Not that they were bad or anything like that. It's just they just didn't hold my attention quite as much as the stuff with Geralt. So, but that could just simply be because maybe that says more about my taste in shows than it does the writing or anything like that. But just personally, I didn't find that part that engaging. The stuff with Kaer Morhen, really anything Geralt centered, I'm always like more on board with. But I am excited to kind of see like what they do with Yennefer's story as far as like the rest of the season goes. So we'll see how that plays out. And then of course, like I said, with Yennefer's part, it definitely feels like they're setting up more for what's to come. Like with Fringilla's character, in the vision, it sounds like she's trying to ally herself with the elves so that I believe she's with Nilfgaard. So I believe so Nilfgaard can come back and try to reclaim some of the northern kingdoms. So it sounds like they're setting up for war. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the rest of season 2 goes and how these characters kind of play out with each other. So I'm definitely interested to see how that goes. So yeah, this episode, I would say in some segments was a little bit slower than the first episode of season 2. Not like in a bad way or anything like that, just kind of, I don't know. The parts where they were at Kaer Morhen, I think, were the best parts of the episode. The parts with Yennefer were not bad by any means. They just, like I said, didn't quite hold my attention quite as much as the parts with Geralt. But I still enjoyed them quite a bit. So I guess we'll just have to see. Hopefully maybe they'll have more episodes where they can kind of flesh out Yennefer's story a little bit more. That could be maybe part of the problem. We'll have to see how that plays out. But as of right now, I would say the second episode still really good. I would say the first episode was probably slightly better. I guess it probably had to be just to kind of get you amped up for the rest of the season. But as a follow-up season, or episode 2 wasn't bad at all. And of course, the title of the episode was appropriate. Kaer Morhen, I believe that was the name of the town. I just said the name of his hometown. I'm gonna look that up real quick and just make sure that I'm not mistaken. Kaer Morhen. Yep. Okay. Sorry, I don't know why I forgot that. I had a complete brain fart right there. But yeah. Title of the episode, pretty appropriate, Kaer Morhen. So that's where we are in the episode, and that's where the main conflict takes place. The other thing I liked about the episode is the way it kind of leaves off too. The ending of the episode, it leaves with Geralt kind of facing the recognition that the world around him is changing. Because as he kind of notes, Kaer Morhen was always kind of the safest place he could go to because it was a home of the Witchers and it was where they were trained. It's where he was trained. And now it's kind of, you see that it's been invaded by this monster, which you get the impression up until this point that was something that didn't really happen ever. And so now Geralt has finally realized that the world around him is changing and his world is changing. And so he's kind of accepted the fact that, the world is much more crueler than what he initially thought. And Ciri is kind of coming to terms with this as well. So we're kind of seeing her mature as a character and seeing her grow as a result of that. And the episode basically ends with her basically training with Geralt. So it seems like he's going to try to teach her the art of fighting and defending herself. So I'm definitely interested to see how that plays out, for sure. I know in Witcher 3, she was definitely... she was a pretty badass character. Witcher 3, I think, obviously takes place, long after where we're at in the story as far as the show goes. So, because in the game, Ciri is a very accomplished warrior and knows a lot of, interesting tricks and maneuvers that I assume she learned from Geralt. So I assume this is kind of like the beginning of that, where we get to see her develop into the character that we see later on in The Witcher 3. I don't know how closely the games follow the books. I've heard that they don't follow them super closely, but I'm still very curious to see how that plays out. As far as like negatives go for this episode, again, as far as like I wasn't super engaged in Yennefer's part of the story, but that could just be personal taste. So I don't know if I'm necessarily going to count that against the episode. Not a whole lot of negatives, honestly. Just a little bit slower than the first episode of season 1. Special effects, I think, still looked really good. I don't really have very many complaints there. It would have been kind of nice if we could have gotten to know some of the other Witchers a little bit more. We do see a couple of them, I believe, get killed by Eskel when he transforms, and kind of like that lacked some of the impact. But then again, there aren't very many Witchers in the castle, and so... I guess the fact that any of them dying would be considered, would be big because there's not very many of them left. So I suppose, the death still has an impact. But it would have been kind of cool to see more of these characters and kind of get to know them maybe just a little bit better. But I guess with everything going on and the story and everything, and the fact that they have to go back and forth between Geralt and Yennefer's story, I guess, in an hour they've only got so much time to do that. So I guess I can understand, why they didn't spend too much time on that. And really, honestly, the focus of the story was really Eskel's character and his transformation into the tree monster, into Groot. So I think it worked fine as is. As far as, if I had to give this overall score, I think the last episode I gave, probably in, an 8.7, the last episode? I guess I'd probably give this, around an 8.5, just... Not quite as good as the first episode, but still really good. Still a solid episode. It still gets a recommendation from me to watch. So, still it leaves me excited. It leaves me wanting more for the rest of the season, which I guess is really all you can ask for, an episode of this show. And Once again, yeah, I like the acting of the episode too. The actor they got to play Vesemir, I think he did a great job in that. I'm not sure what his name is. Once again, Henry Cavill as Geralt, he's fantastic. The actress that plays Yennefer, she's great too. Can't remember what her name was. But yeah, like all around, like there's just great acting throughout this entire season. So I think it's definitely there's a lot of great performances in this for sure. So yeah, it's definitely got me excited for what's to come. And I thought I heard somewhere that there's going to be at least 7 seasons of The Witcher. So, hey, as long as they keep producing with this level of quality, then I'm totally on board with it. So yeah, I think most likely the 3rd episode review probably won't be up this week. I think most likely it's going to be next week, episodes 3 and 4. So like I said before in the last one, it'll probably be about 2 episodes a week, most likely, just because with work and everything else, it's kind of hard to find time to do these every single, it's hard to find time to do these, super often. So, and I just don't want to get inundated with too much recording, even though I am genuinely enjoying doing these reviews. But yeah. So anyways, yeah, that was my review for this episode of The Witcher. If you like what you heard, once again, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will catch you all next time.